are the writers, is the room at all concerned with pleasing the fans, or or is it just about like
totally no. I think people are very aware of, you have a TV show because people like to watch it, and you want the people who love the show to continue to love the show.
Yeah.
And I think because I was a fan of the show before I started working on it, I think everybody on the show was a fan of the show before being involved with it.
Totally, yeah.
So I think everybody is sort of coming from that place to some degree. And no, certainly there's no feeling of like, let's stick it to the fans.
I'd like to begin with a fact.
So deep. So deep.
Or in Chicago, New York, or Los Angeles.
You have to go deeper, I think.
Hello and welcome into the show. This is Deep Noodle, and I'm your host, Nathaniel August Williams. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a great show for you today. My guest today is an Emmy award-winning writer, comedian, producer, and actor. She is known for her work as a writer on Take My Wife, AP Bio, and The Animaniacs, for which she won an Emmy, and is returning for her 4th season on Rick and Morty as an executive producer. Jess Lacher, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Nathaniel.
You're welcome. And I, because the truth will eventually out, I should mention that we are also married.
It's true.
Yeah. How are you doing today?
I'm okay.
Yeah. It's a crazy time in LA. There's been a lot of fires and a lot of sort of consternation lately. It's a live feeling, it feels like here.
Yeah. Some might say it feels downright bad.
Yeah. Some might say that. Do you feel, is that the, what's your take of the town at the moment?
Just the general morale of the town.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty low. I mean, I'm lucky to be working, but I know a lot of people are not working and haven't been working for a lot of last year because of the strikes. And now there's a big downsizing happening. And I think, people had barely come back from COVID before the strike started, and now the fires, and it does feel like it's a little bit of an apocalyptic moment.
Yeah.
For the industry.
For sure. Do you think the industry is going to bounce back?
Well, it's carrying on. Yeah. I mean, people are talking about trying to keep more production in LA. I hope that this latest, I think the fire has been such a big bad thing that people are sort of rallying. It feels a little bit like the straw that threatens to break everything. And so people are talking about making an effort to keep more production here. So I think if that could be a thing that comes out of all of these bad happenings, that would be one good thing.
That'd be one good thing for sure.
Yeah.
I told you before we started, I was going to hit you with some real hardball questions. So I hope you're ready for that.
Okay.
We're going to take no prisoners here on Deep Noodle. Do you think that our baby is the cutest baby in the world, or just like in the country? What, where would his cuteness fall, do you think?
I've never seen a cuter baby than our baby.
Me neither. Where the listeners are just shutting off the fact. Most of this will be us discussing how cute our baby is. So, Rick and Morty is such a cool show. I was a huge fan of that show before you started working on it. And
as was I. Yeah,
of course. And we've talked a lot about it. But I kind of I tried to put myself in my old, fan brain, and try to think like, what would I want to know if I didn't already know some of the things? I think I'd be very curious how the writer's room works, just what the mechanics are like, who brings in ideas, how many people are in your room?
There's like 10-ish people. I think that's about the number. We have, there's writer's assist. We have 2 writer's assistants in the room. And then sometimes we'll have, some people come and go, but I think like 10 to 12 people are generally in the room.
Yeah.
Which is a good sized a good sized room. I guess the way that it normally works is we have on Rick and Morty 26-week seasons of the room, which is great to have that much time. I've been on shows where the rooms are very short, like really insanely short, and it's a real race to try to get the episodes written. But we have 26 weeks to write 10 episodes, which is it would be great to have even more time, but that's how much time we have. And the beginning of that season will be a lot of just like noodling.
Yeah.
But people,
thank you for using the brand.
People do bring in ideas. People pitch stuff that they've been thinking about. We always have sort of a hopper of stuff from previous seasons that we didn't quite figure out that hangs around. And so that stuff is always sort of floating around. But I think for a lot of the episodes, we just sort of talk about ideas that are interesting to us until that sort of starts to like come together into one or until an idea comes out of it. But you just sort of have conversations about things that would be interesting. And then you sort of talk about how characters would fit into those ideas, or it's pretty, I don't know, a lot of, they come from different places.
Yeah, of course. But it's very collaborative. Everybody is sort of in, for the most part, at the beginning of the process.
Totally. It's also like a very friendly and sort of like, it's a room where everybody is really invited and encouraged to talk and I always sort of have this idea of like that a writer's room, you have this like ball that you're pushing up a hill. You're like you're all working together to like push this heavy thing up a hill. And so everybody sort of has a hand on it. And sometimes some people are doing more than others, but it does sort of feel like this, like when it's working, that it's a collective effort to make an idea work. And so, we'll come up with sort of a broad idea, like a 2 or 3 sentence long description of what the idea is. And then on Rick and Morty, it always has to sort of get past Dan. It has a lot of input and a lot of feedback, and
that's Dan Harmon, the show creator, and
then once we sort of get his blessing on something, we continue to develop it. And by the time it gets sent off to script, it'll be usually like, it'll start as an outline, and then you make like how many, I mean, I don't know, you end up with like a 7 or 8 page outline that you'll bring back to the room, or bring to the showrunner. And then that is what you take out to script to actually write the script.
And so when you say take out the script, it's basically one writer gets assigned the episodes or these concepts to kind of go out and then execute what the room has come up with.
You'll take the out, well, though usually it's the same writer who's going to script who's written the outline. So you've written an outline and then you'll take it to script. Yeah.
And I think one thing worth mentioning is that, and this was surprising to me, is that how long it takes to go from scripts to actually people seeing the episode on.
And there are specific delays to things like the writer's strike slowed us down, and things come up and slow stuff down sometimes. But like, for example, the episode that I wrote for season 8, which will come out at some point this year, has still not been released, but I wrote that right after we got married, which was, when was that? 2.5 years ago?
Who can know?
I don't know.
Yeah. 2.5 years ago, I think.
Yeah. So it can be like a 3-year.
Right. I mean, basically the so you just said, so it's 3 years, and the episodes can be. Yeah. But the episodes you've written have not aired yet.
No.
And you're coming off your 4th season.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's crazy.
And we've been renewed for, we've been picked up for 2 more seasons. We've been picked up through season 12. And it's only season 7 has aired. So it sounds crazy I think when people hear that, you think like, that's stupid. Like, why would you pick up 2 more episodes, 2 more seasons? But it's because we just finished writing the 10th season and we have to, you have to like keep the pipeline.
Yeah, that's a long timeline.
It's a long timeline.
Yeah. Yeah. Does that make it harder to sort of like it feels like the feedback that you would get from the audience, it'd be hard to sort of, feel how things are working and, this plot line or this concept really went over well. And you just don't get that feedback for a long time.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's true. And in a broad way, that's true. But like the episodes that are going to air this year, we just were finalizing them in the last months, and some of them still are in that pipeline. So there is still time to like re-record stuff or,
Yeah. Yeah.
But you can't, but not to like say, oh, the fans don't like this character. Like, let's kill Spacebath or what. Like, no.
Yeah, totally. What is the relationship between the fans and the writers of the show? Like, how are they? Are the writers, is the room at all concerned with pleasing the fans, or or is it just about like
totally? No, I think people are very aware of. You have a TV show because people like to watch it, and you want the people who love the show to continue to love the show.
Yeah.
And I think because I was a fan of the show before I started working on it, I think everybody on the show was a fan of the show before being involved with it.
Totally, yeah.
So I think everybody is sort of coming from that place to some degree. And no, certainly there's no feeling of like, let's stick it to the fans.
Sure.
Because you want people to keep liking the show and you want to keep making the show. And
I think I guess I was just wondering if, sometimes it's like, this won't be popular, but it's something we want to explore or we want to do, you know what I mean? Like that kind of thing, not sticking it to the fans, but sort of like, this is about the creative, I don't know, journey of this character.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that both things are true. I don't think there's nothing that I can think of where we were like, oh, we really want to do this, but the fans are going to hate it. You know,
right.
Like, you hope that like you'll be able to follow those creative impulses, and also that the show will continue to be liked by some people.
Yeah, well, a lot of people like it for sure, and it seems like people are going to continue liking it. You mentioned, Dan has a sort of, Dan has a lot of input, and something you said to me before was that working with Dan is sort of like a masterclass, like a storytelling masterclass, sort of, that he has a very clear vision and that he's really good at getting to the core of what makes a good story.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that story circle stuff that I'm sure people know from that, from Channel 101. And, that really is that drives every episode of the show. And like from the beginning, we're trying to circle stuff. And as you write it and it like iterates through the process, you try to always keep it so that it circles. I think that's a really useful tool for TV especially.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that? It is kind of out there on the internet. I think people know a little bit maybe about Dan's, the story circle.
Well, it's really it's not like Dan's idea. It's really like, and he would, I'm sure, say this too. It's like Joseph Campbell classic, like hero's journey. And it's just sort of, what if you mapped the hero's story onto a circle, which is great, especially for TV, because in an episodic TV series, you want every episode to sort of come back to reset so that you can make another episode and keep going and going. So the circle is the hero's journey. It's, you start out in the ordinary world, and then there's a call to adventure, and the hero refuses the call, and then ultimately decides to go on the adventure, go into the special world.
Yeah.
And in the story circle, it's like the top of the circle is you can think of it as the good part of the circle, or the conscious part of the circle, or the day part of the circle. And then the bottom part of the circle is the night, or the death, or the bad, or the unconscious. You're dipping into this, this other world. And that's where the second act of the story takes place. And you get into that special world, and you have trials, and you're forced to adapt to the new world. You find what you're looking for, but you have to pay a heavy price for it. Return to your village.
Yeah.
With your elixir, whatever you got.
The golden fleece.
Sure.
Yeah. That is such a cool tool, I would say. Tool, as you called it. I think it's exactly right. The Joseph Campbell ideas have been around for a long time, and I think that there are a lot of writers and screenwriters and Hollywood people that love his ideas. But I would say that like Dan Harmon was the first person that really kind of codified that into a story. Like if you try to map, like if you read Hero of the Thousand...
traditional way that it maps is the way that you learn a story in elementary school, which is like rising action, climax, falling action, or whatever. There's that great like Kurt Vonnegut on a chalkboard, like mapping out a story. It's hard to, I would say the original Joseph, like I love Joseph Campbell. I know you do.
As you know, but the original Joseph Campbell sort of, structure is not super easy to write to. You think it is. You're like, oh, great. I'll just have a mentor character and I'll have an apotheosis.
There's so much in there. In like Hero with 1,000 Faces, it's hard to try to like fit a story that you want to tell into something that has that many like archetypes in it.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think not useful. And so I think like what's useful about this, the way that circle plays out, is that there's only really 8 beats.
Yeah.
And you can just sort of use those as like tent poles that keep everything from just like spinning out into
right disaster. Yeah, it's sort of a guiding principles. How do you deal with the sort of episodic versus canon nature of the show? Like I think as a fan, the canon stuff is so, and when I say canon, I mean like the overarching story that has been happening from the beginning of the series, Rick's nemesis and his kind of backstory and the death of his wife and all that. And I think as a fan, like that stuff, you're so curious about that.
I think the reason we all love that canon stuff is because it's not every episode.
Yeah.
I think if we got as much of it as we think we want, it wouldn't be as satisfying when we do get it. So I think
cake.
Yeah, I think that's why I think it is. There's a balance that we try to keep where there's enough of it to keep those fires burning. But then it also, I think a lot of the most joyful episodes are not are not in that like larger story. They're just one-off episodes. That's why Rick and Morty is so fun to make, I think, is because it can have both of those types of episodes.
Yeah. It's such a, because it takes place with this kind of concept of the multiverse, that there's a little bit of this feeling like anything could happen, basically. Like there are sort of no constraints.
Yeah.
Does that make it easier or harder in certain ways
to write it? I think it's much easier.
But easier. Okay. Interesting.
Well, just because that if you like get into a jam when you're writing, you can just literally be like, and there's a gun that does that, oh, you have to get out of this pit, like use your get out of the pit gun or whatever.
Right.
So I think it's much easier and very fun.
Interesting. Yeah, I would. Yeah, I'm of two minds about that. You hear a lot of writers say that like constraints,
but there are so many constraints in the show. I mean, the constraints come from the characters, and like, would these characters act this way? Would they like choose to do these things? So that gives you it's never just like a wild, like anything could happen, because
right.
You're with characters who at this point now have like 10 seasons of stories behind them, and 10 seasons of like making choices and saying things, and they're going to continue to be themselves.
Yeah. Do you guys ever get into these sort of, like the South Park people sort of say like, oh, the Simpsons did it. The Simpsons did it. There's been a lot of sort of animated.
Every room I've ever been in has, I mean, the Simpsons is certainly a good example because they have a zillion episodes, but I've never been in a room where we didn't have ideas that we would spend 2 days on and then realize, oh, this already is a TV show.
Yeah.
So I mean, that happens that's like everybody's constant job is.
Right.
But now, because there's so many episodes of Rick and Morty, we even will be like, oh no, we already did that. We
right.
like, this is, this already happened 4 seasons ago. So
yeah. Is there a character that you find, that you like writing for the best? Do you have like
I think they're all very fun to write for. Yeah. I do like when I like them all. I think Summer is very fun. I think Space Beth is very fun.
Space Beth is great.
Yeah.
I
mean, but then it's also it is just it's very joyful to get to write lines for Rick to say, "This is wild,"
Yeah,
it's like
totally.
What a fun thing to be able to do.
Yeah, Space Beth, great character. I feel like I've maybe. I mean, I don't know that. Has a character ever had a lesbian relationship with her own clone in the canon of
human history?
Yeah, like I'm trying to think. Maybe there might be like some movie in the 70s or something where maybe that happens, but I can't think. Like, certainly not in an animated.
Not on my watch. I mean, I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, that struck me as like a very unique idea, and yeah, and a great episode. If people haven't seen that episode. So one thing I wanted to ask is, I read that your bio kind of at the top of the show, and that's a lot of great stuff. A lot of great stuff there.
Thanks, Nate.
You're welcome. Do you feel like you've made it? Do you have a sense of like, oh, I've made it as a writer in the industry, or like I've made it, I've achieved my dreams?
I feel in the last year or so, like I've reached a point where I feel less nervous that I'll never work again. And that to me feels like making it.
Yeah.
I don't know what, I mean, I feel I think right now, if you're working in this industry, it feels like you've made it because so many people are not able to work. Yeah. So I do feel just like I'm incredibly grateful to get to go to work, especially on a job that I love with people that I love working with. And I hope that, Rick and Morty, 1,000 years, like it's a great, it's a great show to be working on, and to be able to work on something, because I've worked on so many shows. I mean, I think AP Bio is a great example of this. Like, AP Bio is such a great job and a great room, and such a like beloved little show. But it didn't get picked up again. It got, after the 4th season, it got canceled, and we were just so sad to not be able to continue making that show, because we were having so much fun writing it. And it was just so fun to like be together every day. And so that's why another reason it feels so good to write on Rick and Morty is because it's a show that people love. You feel a little bit of security, or at least cross your fingers that you'll be able to like keep making it. So that makes me also feel like I've made it.
Yeah, I think, we've known each other a long time. We met in middle school.
Yeah.
So we did like high school theater and stuff together.
Yeah.
And I guess like if you met your 16-year-old self.
Oh, I would be over the moon that this was my job.
Yeah.
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 I think I'd be very happy to be doing this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
I think I'm always curious about people's careers that, like, is there enough success to ever feel like, okay, I've climbed the hill and it's all gravy from here, or, I've done what I need to do. And
I mean, I definitely don't feel like it's all like, I don't feel like I could ever relax.
Perfect.
until I die.
Yeah.
But I do feel like I'm able to, like, for example, right now I'm between seasons, but I know I'm coming back for the next season. So I can actually like kind of enjoy being between seasons.
Right.
Which is, sometimes you're between seasons and you're in a total panic about whether you're going to get hired for the next season and whether the show's going to come back for another season. And it's not like a super chill, secure job.
Yeah. Yeah. Just being a writer in general, like a
Yeah.
Hollywood writer.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Do you think that it is part of do you think that there's a level you could get to where you wouldn't feel that stress all the time, or that
The stress of like, will I ever work again?
Yeah. Or just, if I don't, I'm okay with that. Is it like something, is there an internal engine that is just going to like power that need, or is it an external?
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, I think there are other things you could be doing. It's like if we had like unlimited money, if we were rich,
Yeah.
and we were like, oh, we don't have to work anymore, and the job was only ego, you know what I mean? That would be a different feeling than like if my job goes away. And also just because you're surrounded by so many examples of like very, very talented, very experienced people who aren't working.
Right.
So I think for me, the fear is the job would go away and I wouldn't be making money, and I would have to like pivot in some way to like, I don't know, what am I, now I'm going to try to be a teacher, and now I'm going to try to be a different kind of a person.
Yeah.
I sort of have spiraled out on this question, I guess.
Yeah, it's a tough question. I basically asked
But
you.
I don't think, I don't really know anybody. I just don't think that's a common feeling in this industry, because the industry is so volatile.
Yeah.
That you just don't, I think you can feel, certainly I think people have moments where you're like, oh, I'm hot shit because I sold something, or I got this job or whatever.
Yeah.
But then that ends.
Yeah.
And then you're just alone with your nightmares.
Yeah. I think that, I'm curious. I think there's a perception about getting into this business and working, and where you're like, if I could just get this thing, I would be happy.
But isn't that every industry? Isn't that like capitalism is just sort of like, oh, if you could only work harder for 5 more years, you would be a manager, and then you'd be secure, and then you'd be, if you could only like work an extra like 10 hours a week, then you would get what you'd be able to retire early. And then it's just all, I think like everything is just so built on this idea of like, well, you can't be happy. You're not supposed to be happy with what you have. You're supposed to always be striving and always be like, oh, if only I had my own show, or if only I was running the show, or what. And that is one thing that I don't suffer from, is like, I'm very happy to just be doing what I'm doing and just try to enjoy the time that you get to work, you know, especially when you're working on something that you like and with people that you like. It just feels really lucky, and like it's a real bummer to have that attitude of like, you know, I'm doing this thing, but secretly in the back of my head, I'm always planning my next move, and I'm always sort of like scraping to be successful in some way.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I guess we're kind of scratching the question of like fulfillment, you know, like how do you become fulfilled? And, you know,
well, not by like selling your own TV show, I don't think.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people might think that is how you become fulfilled.
I know people think that.
Yeah. And in this industry,
it's literally what this whole industry is based on.
Yeah. Power is everything.
And everybody, like from the beginning, I mean, I have been doing this job for like 10 years or something. And from like the very beginning, from when I was like in my first room, people are always like, well, do you want to run your own room? Do you want to have your own show? Do you want to do, and you know, I don't know. Is
it a better life? Is it a better,
well, it's definitely not a better life. Like, you know, I think if you know people who have had their own shows and run them, and I will say our boss on Rick and Morty, Scott Martyr, who runs the Rick and Morty room, is an incredible showrunner and like a very, I think, happy person who finds a way to balance his family with the room. And it's remarkable to see. But I've seen a lot of people not have a lot of balance trying to run a TV show. And to me, it has never looked like very much fun. Yeah.
Yeah. The hours are crazy. There's a lot of pressure.
Yeah. You're responsible. I mean, you're basically doing the business of managing like millions and millions of dollars. Yeah. And like all these people's jobs depend on you and schedules depend on you. And I just think it looks very stressful.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
How did you get into this? Like, how did you come up in the biz? What was, you know, did you want to be an actress or did you get it, you know, like,
God, I feel like you should tell my story of my journey from seventh grade.
From Annie.
Yeah, we were in Annie together in middle school. Yeah. I did love theater. Mm-hmm. I loved the theater in my youth. Yeah. I loved acting in plays. Mm-hmm. And then I actually took a playwriting workshop. This guy who was a playwright who had gone to our high school, came to our high school and did a playwriting workshop when I was, I think, a junior. And I had always loved writing. That was always, you know, I had always loved writing stories and whatever. And I wrote a play when I was in high school that like won a little playwriting contest. And I really, that was like a big, I think that was one of those things that happened to you when you're a teenager where you're like, oh, this is something that I'm good at. And I was getting some like validation from the world about it. And I think I knew, like, I loved theater, but I knew in my heart that I was not that good at acting. and that if I pursued it, it would be a bad life. Yeah.
That's a lesson that I never really learned. Still learning.
But I don't know. I started writing plays and then I went to college and I wrote plays in college. I was able to study to take some playwriting classes in college. And then after I graduated, I did a couple of plays in the New York Fringe Festival with friends. I think we did 3 plays. We did 3 summers in a row. We did a play in the New York Fringe Festival. And that was that
you wrote.
Yeah, I wrote. Yeah. That was, you know, that was like cast with all friends and directed by friends and produced by friends. And it really was like a very scrappy, like, you know, building the sets on the stage. And it was a really joyful experience and made me feel like, like I loved that way of telling stories, of like writing scripts and telling stories in that way.
Yeah. Those experiences, when you're in them, it just feels so, you're just like, oh my God, it's so hectic. And then you look back and you're like, oh, these were the best.
Yeah.
These are the very best times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I knew, I think I did not have the lesson of being able to enjoy what you're doing while you're doing it was not something that I had learned at that point in my life. Like I knew that those times were really good and that what we were doing was really like important and fun and who I was as a human. But I had to like enact this anxiety about it constantly. Like
sure, yeah.
I had to be like, I don't know if people are going to like it. And should I even be doing this? And do I believe in my work or whatever? But like, I don't know. Did I actually feel that way? Or was I just trying to, I think in the way that when something good is happening to you, you have that like preemptive.
Yeah.
You don't want to look like you're enjoying it too much.
Yeah. Or the universe will take it away.
Punished.
Yeah. The universe will punish you for enjoying anything too
Yeah.
much. Yeah. That's a weird lesson that somehow we all get taught, or maybe not all of us, but some of us. Great. So
I was doing theater, and then I started doing this group called the Story Pirates in New York that I worked with for many years with friends from college.
Awesome. Just for people who don't know what the Story Pirates is.
It's an arts education nonprofit, and now it's a podcast, and they're doing all sorts of stuff. But when I was doing it, it was a very like ragtag group. We would go to public schools in New York City and teach creative writing workshops, and then take the stories that the kids wrote and turn them into a show, come back and do the show. Amazing. So I built puppets and I did fundraising for that group. And that was like a lot of how I spent my time when I was living in New York. And then I ended up getting my MFA in fiction, and then which was, I don't know, a little like I almost got off this path, and then ended up moving out here. And the first room that I was in, I had a very easy way into this business, I'll say, because I worked on the web series of this show, Idiot Sitter. And then when Idiot Sitter got picked up on Comedy Central, they asked me to come be in the room. And that was my first job. And then I went from that to the Detour, and then Take My Wife, and then Animaniacs. No, yeah. And then 8P Bio. And then Pixar, and then Rick and Morty.
Yeah. Would you consider that sort of getting that web series picked up? Was that like a big break moment for you, would you say?
For me?
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that was Jillian Bell and Charlotte Newhouse, and they just offered me a space in that room. I don't even think I had a writing sample at that point that was a TV pilot. I think I had just written plays.
Right.
So yes, that was a very fortunate
big moment.
Yeah, but it was because I had been doing, like, I had been writing, I had been like rewriting stuff and like trying to help people with projects and
writing on the show, so they knew you. And when you say you almost kind of got off the path, like when you were getting your master's, you mean like you would have gone into like fiction writing or writing novels, like that kind of thing?
Yeah. I think I went and got my MFA because I used to teach in the summer program at Kenyon College, which you know about. I taught in this creative writing program for high schoolers in Ohio, where basically it was like a month of my summer every year. I would go live in Gambier, Ohio, and just teach creative writing classes. And most of the other people who taught in that program were people who had their MFAs and were in the sort of literary world, and people who were teaching college and teaching writing. And I really love, as you know, a lot of those people became really close friends, and it was just a moment where I wasn't sure what I was supposed to be doing. And I was like, well, maybe this is what I'm supposed to be doing, is teaching writing,
right?
Instead of trying to like make theater and figure out whatever that is, like maybe it's this other kind of writing, which is something which I do love. And I do, hope that someday I'll have the like time and brain space to like write in that way again, just to like sit down and write by myself.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
What would you say to a young person who's like trying to get into the business right now? Say you've just graduated college and you're thinking about moving out to LA, like any advice or warnings?
I always tell people, oh, sorry.
It's okay. It'll survive.
Sorry. I always tell people that the best thing to do is not to be like gate kept by whatever your idea of success is, or whatever your idea of, you have to get a job, or you have to, obviously you do have to get a job because you have to make money. And that's, well, it's another thing. It is hard to have to make money. It would all be easier if you didn't have to make it. But again, capitalism.
Surviving it, for me, I went to New York right after college, and it was just like the grind of having to make enough money to survive in New York, and do it with a job that allowed you enough free time to pursue other things. So you were basically working like two incredibly demanding careers simultaneously. It's amazing that anyone ever kind of makes it out of that. I feel like,
totally.
It's a real grind, those early years.
But what I always say to people is that I think whatever you need to do to continue to be creative on your own terms, is the best way to break into this industry, and also just to like stay sane and to figure out like what kind of stuff you like to make. I think just being creatively engaged with the world in some way, if you're, I don't know, people who are like doing stand-up or making a web series or whatever, I think you have to be willing to do that rather than show up and wait for somebody to give you a job.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
Don't wait to be chosen. For me, I always really wanted to be chosen. I wanted the like universe to kind of bend down and say like, we choose you. And it just, it never, it doesn't really work that way.
Nate, I choose you.
Thank you. Thank you. I choose you. I choose you also. And tell me what you think of this, but for me, one of the best things that I found in moments of struggle was finding a active community to be a part of that was making things, and that, like for me, it was like just finding an improv theater. There were years when I just was like an actor waiting tables and bartending, and it was like, you have your few buddies that you talk about it with, but there was just no sort of like theater to go to all the time, or like a place to get fulfillment. And so like, did you have, was that Story Pirates for you?
Totally.
Yeah. And I would just say, if you're young and thinking about getting into the business, like finding and it's tough. I mean, there aren't a lot of things like improv. I mean, yours is like a theater troupe or a theater company, basically, which I feel like in the 50s or 60s, there's a lot of that in New York. And it was, I
think people have, or I know people who have writing groups that they care about, totally, like that they've like maybe found online or whatever. And that those people are able to be like sort of a support for you. And those things can be helpful, but it's super hard. It's super hard to find those, communities. But that is one good thing about Los Angeles, is that there's so many people looking for that same thing, I do think. Yeah. Do you feel like it's important to be in New York or in Los Angeles? Like if you're trying to make it in the, like, I'm sure you can. I think it's hard.
You just mean you can do it not being here?
Yeah, I'm sure that there are people who live other places and work in this business.
Right.
But
did they start here and then move, or did they grind it out and make it in?
I think it is very, very you would have to be like a very special person to live in, I don't know, Illinois.
Yeah.
And get a job on a show here. But I think like Zoom makes that more possible.
Yeah.
And I think there are honestly, there are very special people that there are like really like unique people who have important takes on things who don't live in these cities. And like, it's my, as you know, great dream to be able to like eventually get out of here and like live somewhere else and still be able to potentially make things. And
you can check out, but you can never leave.
It's tough.
Yeah. I think it feels to me like having people around you that are like, it's easier to find your tribe or find your people when you kind of do physically make it to one of these places. They're incredibly expensive and hard to live in. And I think that is almost like it's like being in boot camp or something. It like bonds you together in certain ways. And I always find that there's a lot of strength in that, just like being near people that were struggling in your same way. And then there's the whole, like a rising tide lifts all ships, where your sort of network brings you up. Was that something that you found in your travels, or did you, were you more of like a solo?
No, I've never been a very solo person. But like my job now, I got my Rick and Morty interview because my best friend was a writer producer on Rick and Morty and said, give this, read this person's stuff.
Yeah, totally.
In the same way that like I have tried to get my friends jobs in that room. And I think that's a enormous part of it, is looking out for people that you like to work with.
Yeah.
Who are your friends.
Yeah. So something we're trying on the show is having our guests bring in a deep or not so deep topic that is interesting to them. And, there's so many kind of deep concepts flying around Rick and Morty, the multiverse and all that stuff, which I want to talk about. But did you have a deep concept or idea, philosophy, a passing thought?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that I think about, just to loop it back to our beautiful baby, is I do think, well, here, I'll ask you this question. Do you think souls predate existence? Do you think he existed before he was born? Or like, at what point do you start existing?
Yeah. I mean, a fantastic question. And I do have a thought on this, but I want to hear yours. I want to hear yours first.
Well, I don't know the answer. That's why I'm asking you. I do sort of, I don't know. It's hard. It's hard not to think that there's some miraculous element.
Yeah.
To his existence.
Yes, 100%. I mean, obviously no one knows the answer to this question. This is some real philosophical noodling. But yeah, I think that it is like, I don't think that his consciousness and the way that he will experience it as an adult, or any of our consciousness, is like, oh, I identify myself as Nate Williams or whatever. I don't think that consciousness is sitting out in the astral plane somewhere as a fully formed entity, right? Yeah. But I do think that that energy, whatever the mystical combination of things that make our being and consciousness is out there. I think it's that idea that we're made of star stuff, that the like carbon in our bodies is the material from stars. Whatever energy that is going on in the universe that trends towards consciousness. Mm-hmm. I think started at the big. I think we all started at the Big Bang. Whatever that singularity is. I think we probably.
You think we're all like nodes of a universal consciousness, kind of.
Yeah, for sure. I think nodes of a universal consciousness. Yeah, like I think that we are. If you want to call it the universe or God or whatever, like we're not just observing that, we are part of that. And I think we have an unknowable shape. I think we are sort of like our true nature transcends our ability to sort of like understand ourselves, Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think my answer is different having had a baby. Then I think if you had asked me that question 2 years ago, I would have said that in my deepest heart, I do believe that we're all just sort of like firing neurons, that there's no order. But I think having a baby changed my perception of what life is and like when it starts, and it's wild.
Yeah, I think like the simple way to think about it is to be like, did his life start when our love began? You know what I mean? Like, where does a human being begin and end?
Yeah.
And not to turn this into a political thing at all, but like where does the energy of existence begin? And it might begin with like your parents meeting each other, or begin when they fall in love, or it might begin billions of years before that when the energies of the universe came around. What is your?
Well, I think now I trend. I mean, this is very wild.
Yeah.
I think he is like I don't know how to explain it. I do in some like deep way feel like he was like a pre-existing person.
Interesting.
Who I was like, I'm your gateway to you can exist.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So do you think he was a person in the way that we think of?
No, not like a person, but like
not a person, but like
a star or a something.
Yeah. Well, do you think he was having an experience of
I don't know
himself before he came to this plane or whatever?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I wonder if he was having an experience before this, and I wonder if he will have an experience after this. I think there's a weird way that having a kid has made me more open to these sorts of like levels of profundity or things that seem like sort of silly or like you wouldn't really believe in them.
Yeah, that's interesting. Is there anything specific do you feel like triggered that, or like something about him?
Well, I just think he's so good.
He is good. He's great.
He's just like he's just cool.
Yeah.
This is a cool guy.
He's the best.
Yeah. Where did he come from?
Where did he come from? We love you. If you ever watch this many years from now, we love you very much. Unnamed child. He has a name. We're just not saying saying the name. I think about it like, okay, well, we went through that same process that he went through, right? And before we were alive, I don't know if dead is the right word to say, but essentially we didn't exist. Our consciousness didn't exist. And this Nate Williams, this sort of assemblage of neurons and electricity, whatever, wasn't having an experience in the pre-life world that I can identify, right? And I would assume that that's what'll happen after we're dead. You'll return to that. But I think that, these are obviously the deepest of questions, but like how does something go from non-existence to existence? We have this huge machine, this huge mechanism that brings us from non-existence to existence. That has to do with the very like fabric of our universe, right? Like if gravity didn't exist, none of us would exist. So it seems like there is this whole engine the universe is an engine producing consciousness, producing forms, right? Like it could be a formless void. Instead, it's this sort of engine of forms.
Yeah.
Whatever that engine, that driving force is, I think our child and us and everyone, we all came from that.
Yeah.
And, and so we're a part of it. So yeah, like I would agree with you. I think having a child, like, you do start to sort of, tickle that question a little bit. Where did you come from?
Yeah.
Where did we all come from?
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember when you were pregnant, you were saying that you were sort of you were sending into the universe this idea of like, I'm inviting a soul to like come live here. And it's going to be a safe place. And
that was before I was pregnant.
Yeah. Before you were pregnant. And in your mind, was that part of like, were you communicating with him? Like what?
I don't know. I think I was just putting something out into the universe. Mm-hmm. And he happens to, pick up on it.
Now, do you believe in that? He happened to pick up on it. Like, do you believe in that in a literal way? Like that, like, or like,
well, there's an idea that I like, which I think is a Keats phrase, which is negative capability. Have you heard of this idea? Okay. Well, it's basically the idea that in order to make good art, you have to be able to live with not knowing things or to not always be trying to make sense of something. This like negative capability is the ability to say, this is unknowable. This is beautiful and I don't understand it and I'm going to make it anyway. And I think that is where I've landed with that question and with like our kid. And, I would not even want to say, I don't even want to like say out loud, like a hypothesis because it feels too important to be wrong about. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a beautiful place to end it. One good thing in the world, one good thing that happened to you.
I like that.
Yeah. One good thing that you're happy it exists.
I love to get a cortado from the coffee shop.
What's a cortado?
It's like, it has less milk in it than a cappuccino. It's like an espresso drink with less milk in it.
Oh, all right. Like a stronger espresso?
Yeah, it tastes a little bit stronger, but then you also don't have to like drink so much milk. I don't want to drink a ton of milk. I just want the coffee. Yeah. And I love to walk to the coffee shop. Mm-hmm. And I love to, the coffee shop is called Valerie. So
Shout out to Valerie. Jess Lacher, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
I hope you'll come back and do the show again.
Yeah, I live in your house.
Yeah, you live very nearby. And I look forward to it.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
I'd like to begin with a fact.
So deep. So deep.
Or in Chicago, New York, or Los Angeles.
You have to go deeper, I think.